The grand amphitheater of Galactic Accord Central shimmered like a glass cathedral caught inside a dying sun, suspended above the blue gas giant Delphinus. The station's core was a marvel of neutral space diplomacy etched in crystal, humming, with translation fields, guarded by more than 30 elite species. Today's ceremony, the induction of Unified Security Cohort 500, a new batch of bodyguards, assigned to high-tier diplomats across the galaxy, banners unfurled, hollow projectors carved alien emblems into the air. Applause resonated through the structure's zero gravity. Shell as each towering specimen stepped forward to receive their badge, a Centauri flameborn with magma flowing under obsidian plates, a frail hunter from the moon jungles of Ankara, all muscle and shimmering side-dash blades, an Arxian sentinel, 12 feet tall, armor bio-linked to his spine. And Marcus Rourke, he didn't step forward so much as amble, hands in pockets, unshaven, armor worn to the point of disrespect. A faded earth patch clung to one shoulder like it was trying not to be seen. He stopped center stage, blinking under the lights, jaw shifting slowly as he chewed something unidentifiable. A few of the alien dignitaries turned to their aides. That's the human. He looks ... undercooked. Did they grow him in gravity? Where are his enhancements? When the ambassador of Virelin Prime, a silken being with wings of starlight and a halo of bioneural feathers, stood and gestured toward Rourke, murmurs turned to open laughter. This is a jest, boomed High Guard Commander Hearn, his exoskeleton, gleaming an earthling, as bodyguard to one of the 5. Terran culture values irony, offered a Phyrexi philosopher, chuckling as his ice talks vibrated. This must be performance art. The laughter grew louder. Rourke said nothing. His eyes scanned the room, not the crowd, not the lights, not even the jeering faces, just exits, blind corners, ventilation paths, a subtle nod, a weight shift to his back foot, quiet calculation behind eyes that seemed off, not glazed, not offended, just somewhere else. Do you object to our selection? The ambassador asked, voice sweet, but laced with challenge. Commander Hearn straightened. I object to wasting resources. You've assigned a Terran barely armored, barely enhanced, with no mental shielding to guard one of the 5. One stray pulse, round and heel, vaporize like pollen. Rourke popped his gum. Better hope nothing real happens, he muttered. What was that Terran? The Arxian barked. Rourke rolled his jaw, then looked up for the first time. His voice was even not aggressive, just ... unblinking. I said, you better hope nothing real happens. A silence fell, not heavy, not dramatic, just wrong. As if something in the room had quietly shifted off axis. The laughter dried up. Even the diplomat from the singing wine species stopped mid-hum. Dismissed, the ceremony director said, a little too quickly. The gathering dispersed, still murmuring. The ambassador of Virelin Prime floated beside Rourke as he turned to leave. You didn't defend yourself, she said. I'm not here to defend myself, he replied. I'm here to make sure nobody needs defending twice. She paused. You've killed before. Yeah, he said. But never for applause. The Treaty Gala of Citadel X was an event woven with centuries of false smiles and billion-credit security. It orbited just outside the gravitational well of the binary suns, Rexel and Forn, where light twisted like golden ribbon through the station's massive viewing halls. Rourke hated it the second he stepped in. Too much glass, too many reflective surfaces, too many entrances disguised as art, the kind of place that looked like peace because it dared anyone to threaten it. The ambassador hovered beside him, a luminous veil of stardust sweeping behind her. You don't drink, do you? Nope, Rourke muttered, eyes scanning. I like to see what's coming. Paranoid. Alive, he corrected. Across the ballroom, warlords, traitors, and political weasels gathered under a canopy of floating lights shaped like Terran butterflies, some artistic tribute to Earth's contribution to the Accord's cultural archive. They fluttered in slow orbit. Rourke didn't look up. His gaze tracked the frail security duo slinking near the back, too much tension in the shoulders. The drone waiter who passed by twice, without offering a drink. The cooler air current from the north corridor. Someone just opened a vent path. He turned his head half an inch, and then everything snapped. The lights exploded. All of them. No shatter. Just darkness total, airtight blackout, as if the stars themselves had been punched out. Rourke moved immediately. No yelling. No hesitation. He slammed his arm across the ambassador's chest, shoving her down behind a server pod, drew his combat knife, and jammed a breathing filter between his teeth. A hollow pop followed by a hiss. Gas. The smart kind. Didn't burn. Didn't smell. Just killed the oxygen and made your blood forget what it was supposed to do. The crowd didn't even scream. They gurgled. Rourke counted seconds in his head. 10, 15, footsteps. Now soft, deliberate, pattern-trained, assassins, he heard. Bodies hitting the floor. A blaster hummed, one of the high-frequency cutters used to melt through bone. He stayed low. The assassins moved in threes. Tight formation. Someone with funding had sent them. That meant politics, the Drelvaxi syndicate. Most likely. He popped the seal on a nearby wine cask and kicked it down the Isla. Distraction. The lead assassin turned just enough. Rourke closed the gap in 2 seconds, came up under the attacker's chin, and drove the knife into soft flesh where rebreathers didn't cover. He yanked down hard. No scream. Just a wet click. The other two turned. He yanked the corpse's plasma pistol and fired on instinct. To clean bursts, one through an eye, the other through the throat. The air filled with the smell of ozone and cauterized meat. Silence again. A groan from across the hall. Someone still breathing. A HumAlien aide, hand to her side, crawling through the mist. Rourke grabbed her, hauled her back toward the ambassador. He activated the manual override on the server pod, turned it into a mini safe room using an emergency nanofoam wrap. It hardened in 4 seconds. 3 of them, sealed in, breathing fast. The ambassador stared at him. You killed them. No. I stopped them. They were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. She opened her mouth, then froze. Outside the pod, more footsteps. No panic. No retreat. More are coming. He heard the faint sound of armor grinding on steel boots. They weren't mercs anymore. These were soldiers. Stay quiet, Rourke whispered, blood drying on his fingers. It's not over. He pressed his ear to the pod wall. They're still hunting. The foam-sealed pod pulsed faint orange, alive with the heat signatures of 3 anxious heartbeats. Rourke ignored his own. He was listening, deep listening, not just for footsteps, for breath shifts, for the sound of pressure differentials in the corridor, for intent. Outside, something whispered a high-pitched whine in the alloy. Cutters, plasma scalpels. They were slicing through the hardened shell-like surgeons, clean, quiet, precise. He turned to the ambassador and the wounded aide. 10 seconds. Then they breach. The ambassador steadied her glow. How many? Rourke tapped the wall lightly. 4, maybe 5. They don't talk. That's how I know they're good. What do? We stop being here. With one swift punch, Rourke cracked the foam seal from the back corner where the pod curved near a food intake pipe. He jammed his shoulder into the panel and ripped it open with a low grunt. Thin, greasy ducts led downward, tight and narrow. He pulled the aide over one shoulder like dead weight and nodded to the ambassador. Crawl. The lights behind them flared white as the pod cracked open. Too late. The assassins were in, but Rourke and the others were already gone. The utility ducts of Citadel Ikes were not made for anything biological. Rusted edges, conduits pumping recycled air, dull hums of systems older than most species. The duct curved hard left, then dropped into a vertical shaft 40 feet of nothing. Rourke didn't hesitate. He pulled a carbon cable from his belt and clipped it to an exposed pipe, then rapped. the end around his wrist, and jumped. The wounded aide nearly dislocated his spine as the weight caught mid-fall, but they landed hard on a secondary platform. He hissed in pain. "You still alive?" "Barely," she whimpered. "Try harder." At the shaft's base, they dropped into a maintenance corridor, lit only by the flicker of emergency strobes. A single drone, someone's janitor, bot sputtered along, dragging a mop. Rourke paused. His eyes narrowed. The mop didn't leave water behind, it left blood. He tackled the drone mid-sweep, kicked it over, and yanked the access panel off its undercarriage. Tucked between power coils was a tracking beacon, still pulsing. They were being herded. He crushed it under his boot. "New plan," he growled. The auxiliary armory was 6 minutes west. He made it in 4. The door was sealed biometric. Rourke placed a dead assassin's glove hand over the reader. No luck. So, he kicked the reader until the housing shattered. Hot-wired 2 leads with his knife tip, and triggered a power loop override. The door blinked once, opened. "God bless Terran engineering," he muttered. He stepped inside, and stared empty. Every rack stripped. Rifles gone, sidearms gone, ammo canisters missing. Many someones had cleaned it out before the attack. "This was planned days ago," he said aloud. "Sabotage at the highest level. Someone inside the Accord had invited the wolves in." He spotted one thing left behind, a plasma cutter. Heavy, loud, ugly. He grabbed it anyway. He turned to the ambassador, breath tight, ready to move. Her glow had dimmed. "They'll kill us all, only if we run out of surprises." 2 corridors later, the lights dimmed. Again, but this time, only on the left side. Strategic, controlled. They were being funneled. "Ambush," Rourke whispered. He didn't stop. He just flipped the cutter on, its blade roaring into molten blue flame. From the shadows ahead, 6 figures dropped from the ceiling sleek, armored eyes dead. Rourke didn't wait. He charged. The cutter roared like a jet engine as Rourke plowed forward, molten light slicing through the dark like a comet. The assassins moved fast, quicker than baseline human vision could track. But Rourke didn't fight with his eyes. He fought with memory. Left sweep. Decoy stance. Right flank exposed. He dropped low, rolled under a descending blade, and carved through a knee joint with the cutter. Sparks erupted as synthetic sinew and armored tendons snapped apart. The assassin didn't scream, it simply fell, twitching. Another came at him from the sidelong blade humming. Rourke parried with the cutter's casing, took the hit to the ribs, and head-butted the figure full force. Helmet cracked, something inside crunched. He spun, using the momentum, and slammed the blade straight into a third attacker's chest plate. Flash boil, puncture, drop. The others hesitated, just for a heartbeat, but that was all he needed. Rourke surged, snarling like a cornered beast. The last 2 assassins backed away, tactical retreat, and disappeared into the smoke curling from power conduits, vanished like ghosts. Silence returned. The corridor was wreckage, booties, scorched metal, and flickering ceiling panels. Rourke turned, blood soaking his sleeve. "You two all right?" he rasped. The aide nodded weakly from behind cover, clutching her wound. The ambassador floated beside her, veil darkened, eyes fixed on Rourke. "That wasn't human," she whispered. "Yeah," he said, wiping sweat and oil from his face. "It was." Elsewhere, in a black void war chamber, aboard a cloaked dreadnought, a figure stood over a display table. General Savor, commander of the Drelvaxi Syndicate. His skin, dark glass, veined with bioluminescent toxin. His fingers flexed, claws scraping the holoscreen. "The human is still alive," hissed an aide. "He has killed 11 of our elite Sivor's pupils, dilated into razor-thin slits. He's not elite. He's not enhanced. He's not even shielded. No, General. Then what is he?" The aide hesitated. "Efficient." Rourke pulled a security panel off the wall, tapping into a low-level service feed. Blue holographics flared in flickers, maps, power systems, motion trackers. Heat traced their path. They were being cornered, swept from above and below. The central core was no longer safe. Then he saw it. A ship, docked at Bay 14B. Unregistered. No transponder. Not part of the gala, and not broadcasting to anyone. The ghost ship had slipped in just after the attack began and was leaking ion coolant. That wasn't a transport. It was a breach platform, a warship, and no one had noticed, except him. He looked at the ambassador. Time to go. Where we're taking their ship. The path to Bay 14B was murder. Ceilings cracked. Fire suppression foam rained from above. Corpses of guests lay in twisted positions, eyes open, mouths frozen in mid-scream. Some were soldiers, others diplomats, innocent staffers - collateral. No one had expected real war. Not here. That was their mistake. Rourke's jaw tightened. He picked up a fallen pulse rifle, checked the mag. One good charge left. He handed it to the aide. You shoot to kill. No hesitation. Her hands trembled. You're not you anymore, he said. You're the only thing between her and a bullet. She swallowed and nodded. They entered the docking bay. The ship loomed ahead, sleek, dark, angular. Built for one thing, infiltration. Its ramp was down. The lights were red, and something inside was waiting. Rourke raised the plasma cutter. Let's introduce ourselves. The boarding ramp hissed like a breathing wound. Red emergency lights pulsed along the hull of the Drelvaxi ghost ship, casting long, twitching shadows across the deck plating. Rourke stopped just short of the threshold. He didn't like the smell. It wasn't blood or fire. It was too clean, chemical, sterile, like someone had wiped death away right after using it. He raised a hand, halting the ambassador and aide behind him. Rule 1 of boarding dead ships, he muttered. Nothing inside is ever actually dead. He tapped the wall just beside the ramp. It echoed hollow. He crouched, ran his fingers beneath the plating. His brow furrowed. Pressure's wrong. This bay's rigged. A click from above. Turret. Pods descended. Rourke shoved the aide and ambassador backward as the ship's internal defense. Systems opened fire, silent bolts of compressed plasma screaming through the air. They cut clean lines into the walls behind them. Boiling air and steel alike. Rourke rolled under the ramp, smashed open a side panel, and yanked 2 wires out with bare hands. Sparks shot across his gloves. He took the shock and twisted both strands together. The turrets stuttered, froze, then powered down. He breathed out slow. That buys us 10 seconds. They ran in. Inside, the ship was dark and too quiet, like sound had been evacuated. Even Rourke's footsteps were swallowed by the matte black walls. No crew, no hum of engines. Just the low throb of auxiliary systems and the lingering trace of something awful. The kind of silence that meant the killing had already been done. The aide shivered. This ship's a tomb. Rourke knelt beside a splatter of bluish ichor, smeared across the floor near the cockpit bulkhead. It had been wiped hastily, but not enough. He touched it, rubbed 2 fingers together. Organic, not Drelvaxi. Looks ... frail. The ambassador floated closer. They killed their own. No, Rourke muttered, rising. They killed their crew, left the ship behind to bait survivors like us. He checked the cockpit display. The nav log had been deliberately corrupted, looped coordinates, leading nowhere, but deeper in the buffer. Someone had tried to transmit a message before the systems went dark. Just 2 words, still blinking in red. Not alone. The lights dimmed, then shifted. Footsteps from the back of the ship, slow, deliberate, heavy. Something was in here with them. The corridor behind the engine bay twisted like Intessus, narrow, curved, breathing in its own recycled air. A light flickered in the overhead. Rourke signaled for silence. He moved first, holding the plasma cutter low, tip still glowing faint blue. The shadow moved on the far wall. Wrong shape. Not humanoid. Something quadrupedal. The aide pointed, whispering there by the bulkhead. Then they heard the screech. Not mechanical. Insectile. Wet. Furious. A shape burst from the vent above them, all limbs and teeth, and rage. Claws extended, mouth snapping. Rourke shoved the aide aside and fired point blank with the cutter. Searing. White flame lit the hallway. The creature shrieked as it died, body folding inward like burning paper. The stench was instant chitin and acid. Rourke panted. Not Drelvaxi. The ambassador turned pale light toward the steaming corpse. What was that? A biosculpt, Rourke said. Lab-grown tracker. No soul, no mind. Just kill switch. Instincts. He stood straighter, eyes narrowing. This wasn't a rescue trap. This was a purge pod. Drop it, bait survivors. Let the monsters clean up the evidence. He turned toward the controls. We're flying it, anyway. The ambassador blinked. That's suicide. No, Rourke said. That's what they'd never expect. As he activated the helm, the ship's systems roared to life, screens lighting up. Fuel cycling. Somewhere in the wall. Another skittering sound echoed, then another dot too many. Rourke cracked his knuckles. Time for lunch. The ship screamed. Not the engines, the walls. Metal vibrated with that unmistakable frequency of motion, skittering claws. Dozens of them, running behind bulkheads, inside crawl spaces, above ceiling plates. The biosculpts were waking. Rourke didn't flinch. He shoved the throttle forward. The ship lurched out of the docking bay with a roar of ion thrust, cutting through Citadel X's outer ring like a dagger slipping free of flesh. Behind them, sirens echoed. Too late. He keyed the bulkhead seals. Locked, he muttered. We're airborne. The aide, eyes wide, leaned against the wall. You said they left this ship as bait. If it's a trap, why fly it? Rourke didn't answer right away. He was reading the flight diagnostics. Then he glanced back. Because now I controlled the trap. The bridge was sealed, for now. But the biosculpts weren't designed to breach. They were designed to pressure, to push, to herd. The ambassador's eyes shifted, bright with worry. They're trying to corral us again. They don't know how we think, Rourke said. They think I'll hold the bridge until I starve. He opened a floor panel and pulled up 2 manual servos. But I don't need the bridge. He handed the aide a narrow lever with a glowing tip. This is a manual fusion spike. If I tell you to use it, you jam it into any console you can and turn it hard. Got it? She nodded, fingers trembling. From the back of the ship came the unmistakable sound of metal warping. They were coming. Elsewhere, aboard the Drelvaxi dreadnought, General Seevor watched the stolen ship break away from the Citadel and begin its rapid, erratic course toward the outer asteroid belt. His second-in-command clicked mandibles. Should we fire? It's compromised. No, Seevor said slowly, narrowing his eyes. We watch, we study. That human is too loud to live, but too useful to waste. He turned toward the star map, marking Rourke's position. Let's see what happens when we corner a human with no escape. Inside the ship. Escape was narrowing by the second. Rourke had pulled power from non-essential systems to feed short-range thrust. Lights dimmed, air scrubbers slowed, and the biosculpts, they moved faster. He opened a floor panel and dropped into the service shafts, motioning for the ambassador and aide to follow as they climbed downward. Claws scraped directly above their heads. The steel creaked. They were being tracked, not just by sound, by heat. He cursed under his breath. Damn it, they've got Corsican nerves, blood temperature sensors. He paused, pulled off his utility belt. From it, he took a canister of liquid nitrogen foam, meant for coolant repairs. He popped the cap and sprayed it down the shaft behind them. The temperature dropped. 15 degrees in seconds. The scratching paused, then diverted away. Buy us a minute, he whispered. They kept moving. At the lowest deck, he cracked open a vent that led into the weapons maintenance bay, a chamber designed for rearming drone pods. Mid-combat, what he found made him pause. The racks weren't full of weapons. They were full of cages, twisted, thorned growths of living resin. Within each pulsing chamber, something breath-tore waited. Rows of them, silently twitching in their cocoons. Dozens, hundreds, double quotes. Hell, the aide whispered. They weren't just here to kill. No, Rourke growled. They were here to plant. He turned toward the ignition manifold. This ship was a hive seed. New plan, Rourke said, yanking a detonator cable from the wall. We set this ship to burn. But first he pulled up the nav log and cross-checked it with known Drelvaxi invasion routes. They're a shadow frequency broadcast point, hidden in a stellar gas field. They've got a fleet staging point. This ship's data core can lead us right to it. He looked up, fire in his eyes. We don't just survive this, we end it. The ambassador narrowed her gaze. You're going to strike their entire war effort. No, Rourke said. I'm going to break it before lunch. The stolen warship screamed through the dark, chasing a path only madmen or cornered beasts would follow. Rourke sat at the manual helm, guiding it along a razor-thin corridor of magnetic turbulence, a cloaked dead zone known to smugglers, pirates, and war criminals. But to him, it was a shortcut to vengeance. Behind him, the ambassador floated silently, watching the stars through the cracked viewport. The aide sat near the weapons panel, hands gripping the fusion spike like a sword. Then, the ship shuddered. A low pulse swept through the hull. Rourke's eyes narrowed. We've entered the ghost field. Outside, shadows materialized like dead ships half phased in from another dimension. Towering dreadnoughts with biological plating, folded wings, and crystalline towers pulsing with unnatural light. The Drelvaxi fleet, in orbit around a hidden moon. The breeding moon. Every radar ping vanished into static. No comms, no beacons. Nothing but them and the void. Rourke muttered. They built a fleet here. Quiet. Hidden from the core systems. And the Citadel had no idea, the ambassador said softly. They didn't need the galaxy's attention, Rourke said. Just its silence. Inside the warship, the biosculpts stirred again. Trapped behind sealed bulkheads, they pounded on the doors. The hive knew they were close. It felt the homeworld nearby. Rourke activated the ship's belly drone. It blinked to life, a spherical device with a delivery arm and a small reactor. Charge. Gonna be a short ride for you, Rourke whispered, loading the virus packet data into it. Take this ship's entire nav log and broadcasting logs. Show them their own sins. He opened a floor panel and guided the drone into the ship's internal launch tube. Destination: the central spire of the Drelvaxi flagship. They weren't alone anymore. A dreadnought picked them up on passive sensors, sliding toward them like a sleeping giant waking up. The stolen ship's console lit up with emergency glyphs, targeting arrays, hostile locks. Weapons are hot, the aide said, teeth clenched. We're being painted. They won't fire yet, Rourke said, voice calm. They think we're returning damaged. They want to see what hurt us. He smiled grimly. I'll show them. He flew straight toward the flagship's docking mouth, a gaping circular maw, lined with bioharpoons and absorption veins. Inside, shadows moved, welcoming, curious, predatory, as they crossed the threshold. The ship's doors began to melt behind them, absorption cells. The Drelvaxi intended to digest their own warship, scrub the evidence. Rourke looked at the aide. Now, she jammed the fusion spike into the nav panel and twisted. Power surged, overloading the data burst. At that moment, the belly drone launched, silent, fast, undetectable. It vanished into the flagship's relay tower, carrying everything Rourke had recorded: assassination attempts, planted biosculpts, the breeding bay, and the location of every Drelvaxi warship. Time to go, Rourke muttered. He grabbed the ambassador An aide yanked open an emergency hatch and fired the remote evac charge. The ship exploded in orbit. Dozens of systems came alive across the galaxy. The viral data packets spread, leaking onto neutral channels, military relays, even civilian feeds. Every major government, alliance, and trading house now had proof. The Drelvaxi hadn't just planned an attack, they had already begun one. Their entire shadow fleet had been exposed. Inside the flagship's docking bay, chaos erupted. Bioharpoons launched, too late. Ship fragments tore through hulls. Fires ignited on decks that had never known flame. And through the rupture, 3 figures were seen launching in an escape pod, low profile, analog only, riding the thermal wave of the explosion like a bullet. Inside the pod, gasping for breath, Rourke grinned. That ought to ruin someone's appetite. The ambassador stared at him, stunned. You just took out an invasion force. No, Rourke said. I just gave them a reason not to build another. The escape pod broke atmosphere like a bullet from heaven. It crashed into the outer dunes of Velhar Station, skidding across black glass sand, cutting twin trails into the scorched rock. Emergency flares ignited on impact, tread and white, pulsing like a heartbeat, signaling one message: survivors. The hatch hissed open. Smoke billowed out, and from within, Rourke climbed out first, blood on his brow, half of his jacket torn away. But standing tall, behind him, the ambassador staggered, arm around the aide, both blinking against the harsh twin suns. The Citadel gunship that found them was already mid-hover, side bay doors swinging wide. Troopers poured out, weaponless, stunned, eyes fixed on the silhouette in the dust. Is that? One whispered. The lieutenant nodded slowly. The Human Bodyguard. Across the galaxy, everything changed. In less than 6 hours, the Drelvaxi shadow fleet had gone from myth to scandal. Their entire plan laid bare. Their breeding moons exposed. Their covert invasion corridors triangulated. Civilized systems, once locked in debate, now acted. Trade routes severed. Embassies closed. Bounties placed on Drelvaxi warlords. Armadas deployed, not in weeks, but in minutes. Because one human didn't wait for diplomacy. He dropped a match and set a quiet war on fire. They tried to spin it, of course. The Drelvaxi High Consulate released an immediate condemnation. Rogue actors, isolated cells, no official sanction. But the footage leaked by the escape pod's recorder was clearer than truth. Drelvaxi generals discussing harvest numbers, a frail scientist dissecting a live Citadel diplomat, a high-ranking Drelvaxi voice chuckling. Humans are just overgrown pets with bone knives. Point them in the right direction, and they'll eat each other. When that clip played, the room went silent. Then someone asked, "Where is Rourke now?" Inside the Citadel war room, high above the crust of Velhar Station, the ambassador stood tall before 5 hollow projections of Citadel command. Her hair was singed, her voice steady. You dismissed him, laughed at him, assigned him as a formality. She tossed a dataship onto the war table. He ended a war before lunch. The admiral blinked. And what does he want in return? She turned her head, just slightly. He wants time. Time to eat, she said simply. And then to be left the hell alone. Elsewhere, far from the cameras, Rourke sat alone in the chow hall, bare walls. Dented tray, cup of cold calf, beside a towering sandwich of synthetic bacon, eggs, and something purple he didn't ask about. He took one bite, closed his eyes, and finally exhaled. A junior recruit walked past. Why, sir? Commander, Sir Rourke. Didn't look up. Not a commander, but they said you're being considered for Citadel command authority. He chewed. They also said humans shouldn't be anything more than bullet sponges. The recruit hesitated. So, what now? Rourke stood slowly, wiped his hands on a napkin, and looked out the viewport. Ships were launching, battles were still raging, but this war was over. He gave a half shrug now. Now the galaxy gets a lunch break.